Hey, Steve Riley, welcome to this episode of Great Practice, Great Life. Sometimes the practice of law, being in a law firm, just working in our industry can be very, very stressful, sometimes abusive, bad cases, bad clients, bad judges, bad opposing counsel. It can be toxic and really emotionally distressful, just stressful, just straight up stressful. So today we're bringing a national expert, Dr. Day, to help you figure out ways that you can deal with the stress and sometimes the trauma of the practice. So with that, Dr. Day, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. And thank you for having me today.
Well, it's great to have you here. I know that you're flying around the country, going to different judicial conferences, talking about everything from childhood development and cases to consulting on cases, especially in some of the complex family law cases that you've done. You've done presentations for the AAML, and you're a really sought after speaker, and you're a very unique speaker. Your expertise is very, very, very tight in the legal industry. So I really appreciate you taking the time to be here today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Can you tell a little bit about your practice and the type of cases you work on and the type of people that you serve?
Oh, absolutely. And thank you for asking. Our business is Psychological Affiliates. Our primary office is in Orlando. Right outside in Winter Park is actually our office. And then we have an office in West Palm Beach. We have 8 associates here, and we cover all sorts of forensic cases from criminal to dependency. We do civil litigation and family law cases. We have a support team for our psychologists to help us to be efficient. We also travel, so we are able to meet the needs of most kinds of clients who come to see us.
What does forensic mean? Explain that to me.
Forensic is different than clinical. Clinical is people that come in for treatment. So we develop a treatment plan and psychotherapy. It's not legally related. We have two therapists who specialize in that kind of practice. Then our forensic practice is any psychological issue that has a legal component. So that can be a personal injury case. It can be you were arrested. It can be a death penalty case because we're in Florida. It can also be you've been accused of something. It can be a high conflict divorce. It can be my neighbor's dog bit me and my child now has a scar on their face and I need to know what the damages are.
So, from a forensics perspective, you're basically gotten to a point in your practice career where you serve as an expert on cases that have an emotional trauma element to it.
Correct.
Okay, great. So, one of the things that I'm always worried about, and I kind of carry my own wounds from cases I've tried, and I watch the stress that a lot of my colleagues and some of their teams go through. Could you give us some advice about how to deal with emotional stress or distress, I guess you'd say, in the practice?
Absolutely. I think the first thing we should do is talk about there are really two types of stress I want you thinking about. There's the acute stress. That's when something happens in the moment and you feel it in your gut and you feel like you're nauseous or you're lightheaded. That's that immediate stressor when something happens. That could be during a trial. It can be recognizing you've made a mistake, or it can be something even worse than that, where you're getting yelled at by your boss or somebody just up and leaves their position. That's all acute. We feel it in the moment. Then we have more what we see and ignore is chronic stress. That is something that happens on a day to day basis, and we've compartmentalized it. We put it inside our body and it sits there, but it takes a very significant physical toll on us and a mental toll on us. So the first strategy is really, is this something that's going to pass or is this something I'm ignoring and is going to actually have harmful effects on me? So stress can look a lot of different ways for people. Mental stress means often we lose our concentration, we lose our attention to detail. We stop going for the 8 hours that we're used to going, and we're cutting down and impairing our billable time, and we're unhappy outside of our life. And I always like to remind people we work so we can have our real life outside of the office. And when we lose track of that, we're going to find ourselves in a stressful situation. So, what do we do when that starts to happen? Well, there are a couple of strategies, and that's to be mindful. And mindful means being present and reading your body. That can happen through having a friend that you talk to, making sure you take breaks during the day, and that you're communicating about other things other than work. It means spending quality family time. Doesn't mean quantity as much as quality. So you can spend all day with somebody and not pay attention to them. So it's understanding the difference between quantity and quality. Practicing self care. So, what does that mean? That's a big one, in my opinion. It means sleep is number one. If you are not sleeping, you're not functioning at your peak. So people ignore their sleep habits or their sleep hygiene. You have to have a routine to get ready for sleep, and you have to get your 8 hours in. I am often surprised, particularly when attorneys tell me, oh, I only slept 3 hours and I'm ready for trial. No, you're not ready for trial. You're not at your peak. You have just put a mark, a negative mark in your trial strategy because you're going to be exhausted. So I remind attorneys often you wake up in the morning with a handful of emotional energy. That's all you get through the day. You can drink some coffee and do those things, but it's not going to be the same as having a restful night's sleep, being prepared by having the right breakfast, eating the right food, and maintaining your self care, which includes exercising. So if you're getting ready for a trial, you can't stop doing those things. Those things become more important.
Okay, so let me interrupt you just for a second because you're describing probably two things that every single trial lawyer, or every single lawyer, or every single team member does when they're stressed, which is sleep less, skip exercise. So let me talk for a moment with you about sleep. So my understanding is great sleep hygiene means going to bed at the same time, getting up at the same time. Is that fair? Is that a fair statement?
And it's also getting your body ready to go to sleep. So people develop bad habits. They just go into bed, but they haven't wound themselves down. So they lay in bed for 2 hours, continuing to think. So, what's your sleep hygiene? That's how do you get ready? That's the important habit of having good sleep. You can miss an hour or two one way or the other, but it's that pattern for your body. So your rhythm takes you to sleep. People forget that.
It's probably it's a simple thing, but you're really nailing it. I always try to argue between practicing in a state of burnout is not the best place for you to be, and it's not the best place for your clients to be. Really trying to practice in a position of peak performance, which is a strategy, more or less, and beginning with what you said sleep hygiene, nutrition, and exercise. So, talk to me a little bit more about this because I'm loving everything you're saying. I'm also feeling very kind of guilty, like you're following me around a little bit. So, talk to me more about this.
So, when we talk about our routines, most people give up their routines when they're under stress. So, you have to be that's that mindfulness. Okay, I'm getting ready to go into a trial mode. I've got a lot of prep that I need to do. Make sure your schedule allows for that in the normal course of your practice, not cramming 3 days before a 2 day hearing. That cramming is what we used to do in college and graduate school because we didn't know better. We know better now. So it's about being organized, having support staff. I always feel bad when a solo practitioner or a small firm doesn't have that support. So they take that on for a 12 or 14-hour day before trial and then try to go to an 8 hour trial. Trial work is not the same as in office work. You have that adrenaline rush, but again, you only get so much of it. So by the end after lunch, you're going to feel yourself wind down very quickly and your mind is not going to be as clear. So the three basics are sleep, eat, and exercise. Then we throw in something else. Do not drink alcohol during a trial prep or trial. Alcohol tends to be a coping mechanism that we use to calm down and relax. It's not good. It actually has a counter effect on us, and we're less effective if we're drinking during a trial, even if we think it's good for us so we can go to sleep. Actually, the studies say drinking alcohol or wine before going to bed actually is disruptive to your sleep. You'll wake up more, and your quality of sleep is poor.
Hey, Steve, I just want to talk to you for a minute about probably my favorite workshop to teach right now. It's called The Path to a Great Practice and a Great Life. So it doesn't matter if you're a member or if you're new to Atticus, this is a perfect place to come and start your journey of what a great practice and a great life looks like to you. There are 4 elements to the workshop. The first is about your income. If you're going to have a great practice and a great life, you're going to need some cash. One of the questions I always get asked is there a shortcut? Is there a quicker and easier way of making more money? There is, but there's a catch to it. In order to make more money, you want to study how other lawyers have increased the income and the growth of their practice. One of the things we've done at Atticus for the past 35 years is study what the top 20% earners, 10% earners, and ultimately, what do the top 1% earners do? One of the things that we do is reveal and look at what are the 4 core strategies of a top 1% attorney and how you can learn from that 1%er in increasing your practice. And that can be your shortcut. To grow your practice faster, you need to have a bold vision for what your life looks like. The wind in your sails for growth is ultimately the vision of what a great life looks like. In my experience, lawyers that have a terrific, powerful vision for a great life will grow a great practice quicker, faster, and more efficiently than those who don't. It's one thing to have a dream. It's another thing to take action and build foundations under that dream. That's the next thing that we'll work on the workshop. What are the steps you're going to take immediately from the workshop to start building on your vision of a great life and great practice? So if you're a fan of the conversation of what a great practice and great life looks like, this is the greatest opportunity for you to take action now and register for the workshop so we can work together on taking your vision of your great practice and great life and making it come to life. A link to register is included in the show notes, as well as a longer video by me explaining each element of the workshop. If you're a member of Atticus, it's included already in your membership. If you're new to Atticus, I'm giving you a promo code that will take $500 off. All you have to do is click the link below and put in podcast 500 and it'll get you the discount. So hit the link, register for the workshop. I look forward to seeing you there. With that, I hope you enjoy the rest of the episode. So far, you're ruining everything I learned as a first-year trial lawyer. Like everything from alcohol, sleeping to you're like ruining everything. Like everything. This is the opposite of everything I was told. Keep going. I'm just lamenting that I may have been gotten bad advice as a young trial lawyer. Keep going. I'm sorry.
Well, we all get bad advice because we don't talk about these things.
Oh my
We
goodness.
we start making them up for ourselves, and we get bad habits. And that's really what we're talking about, is making sure we establish a pattern of good habits so we are effective both in our office, because we're often the boss, right? And people are looking at us. So if we're putting in 12-hour days, is that an unspoken expectation to our colleagues that that's what they should be doing? And so they start getting stressed out, and they're less effective in their practice because they're living up to our unrealistic expectations. We can go on and on about how leadership impacts on those people in negative ways, not always positive ways. So, what are some other things that we need to think about as personal care items? It's setting boundaries, and we don't talk about that. When we have negativity from people in our lives, whether that's clients, whether it's our own family or extended family, or our employer or our employees, we need to learn to say no to things. We need to say, that's not okay. I can't do that. And not feel guilty and shamed and embarrassed for recognizing our own limitations. So, setting boundaries to me is a mental health exercise that people do not engage in enough. And we start getting wound down because of it. We're tired. We start resisting going into the office. We avoid certain people or places or activities. So, boundary setting is a big one. After we get that self care, now we're going to start shifting to our mental health. The other thing that's so important for our mental health is having those people to talk to, finding those safe people who know us, who will be good listeners, who are not always advice giving. That gets to be a strain sometimes in a relationship. I love to tell my husband what to do, and he doesn't like it so much. So I try to work on good listening skills, right? So listening and
Oh,
not,
wait a minute. I'm just enjoying that point too much. So I'm enjoying that one too much.
well, you can imagine living with a psychologist, what
I
we have
can.
to put up
Oh,
with.
yes. But it's worse that not only just a psychologist, but an expert psychologist who gets paid to testify. So you're like the worst at this from the perspective of the last person your husband wants to hear advice from because
Well,
you're truly an expert.
Well, he doesn't always believe that, but that's another story. So, that person, that becomes so important. And that could be our high school best friend who we haven't talked to in 6 months, but we pick up in that topic and we know each other. Or it can be professional advice. A lot of clinics have EAPs. So, whether it's a law clinic or a private practice, your company may have employee assistant programs available for free mental health counseling, or your insurance covers mental health care, or you want to pay privately so you're not disclosing that information. So, talk to somebody who's going to give you good advice, who isn't there to tell you what you want to hear, but wait, what you may not want to hear. And that's important for all of us. So, talking to people. So, dealing with boundaries, talking with people. And the next thing is adjusting to your work schedule and the expectations about others and what others think of us. Love your job. That's what we do. So we have that other life that I was talking about. But if we're burning out by the end of the day, we're not enjoying why we're working. We're not living that other life. Develop hobbies, things of interest. They don't have to be skydiving, they can be reading a book. So we often don't think about those quiet hobbies as good hobbies. We think about outdoor and we got to do this or that. No, no. Quiet time where we're doing something we enjoy, that's a hobby. And that replenishes us and helps us go back to the next day of work.
So would video gaming count as a hobby?
Absolutely, it
Okay,
does.
thank God. Thank God. Okay, so it's not a vice. That's a hobby. Okay, good.
So, video gaming tunes our skills, believe it or not. And some of the early gamers have made fortunes when their mothers would tell them to get off videos and go do their homework. They have become very successful gamers. Um, Robotic surgeons have come out of gaming. There are all sorts of things that have turned out to be quite beneficial from being a gamer.
I don't think I'm that good. I'd mainly do it to play with my daughter, but that's a whole other conversation. I just have to justify in some way, shape, or form that it's a legit hobby. Like it's a legit hobby. So sorry to interrupt. We're just
No,
asking.
no, it is a legit hobby, but it does something else. It puts you in touch with your daughter, and
Yes.
that's healing, and that's why you work. So again, if you can find that commonality, what a great opportunity to spend time together. Quality time versus quantity time is the key there. So let's talk about what we do when we do run into some trauma or something that happens at our work site. We have to distinguish between true trauma, which might be a post traumatic stress disorder event, and distinguishing that from an adjustment disorder or what we call an other trauma related event. So they're all very different and affect us differently. But the important thing is recognizing that it's happening to us and not ignoring it. We need to process it in the way that we process best. And that can be by meditating, it can be by talking to somebody, it can be by that professional help that I've talked about. But we can't ignore when something bad happens to us. We have to do something to put it in a place that it doesn't control us, but we control it, whatever that it is. And so, for true post traumatic stress disorders, these are really important events that happen in our lives that can throw us for the rest of our life off course. So, let's identify a couple of those. It is the exposure to an actual or threatened death. Somebody dies in front of us, we're in a car accident and somebody dies, or we almost die in a car accident. That is what we call a criterion A for post traumatic stress disorder. Having sexual violence occur to us is one of those very difficult events that can be a criterion A. Serious injury. In my practice, I see a lot of personal injury victims where they've had traumatic gunshot wounds, fights where they've lost an eye in a bar fight. A dog bite can even qualify as a serious injury, particularly for young children when they're scarred for life. And it can be the death, either a random act of violence or an accident of someone that's very close to us, like a family member or a very close friend. Can be things like war. We think of war as something. Courtrooms can be war, and sometimes in that courtroom, we're exposed to things that no one should ever see. I've had cases where I've had to talk to juries, and juries have seen pictures and videos of things that I still think about today. And I feel so bad for those jurors because of what they had to see. And one case comes to mind, and we all have those cases. So we have to talk about them. We have to identify, do I meet criterion A, or is it something less than that? So we can distinguish it. We have to have that criteria to actually call it post traumatic stress disorder. That distress we feel has to last more than a month. So, what about that month if we have one of those events happen? That's the most critical point because half of the time that we have that negative event happen to us, if we do something to mediate the trauma, we can stop the onset of a post traumatic stress disorder. And that has a special topic, or title. It's called acute stress disorder. So we know that we have that 1 month window to not go into that full blown trauma. So those are, again, we look at what are the mediating strategies. It's to deal with it. Sometimes we have to look at, are we a resilient person and we can get through it by dealing with just a friend or our spouse or our support system, or do we need professional help? What's our temperament? Resiliency falls on a continuum with the most resilient people all the way down to what we call resistant people, where one thing in their schedule changes during the day and they have anxiety and depression. So, where do you fall on that resiliency or temperaments schedule? Environmental. What are the environmental things that impact us? Lower socioeconomic status can influence our environment. We're more susceptible to trauma and distress. Prior traumas make us more vulnerable to the next trauma. And I'm sure everybody has heard about ACEs. Those are the things that happen to us in our childhood that we have to look at. So we need to be trauma informed about ACEs. So if we were raised in an environment where there was domestic violence, when there was alcohol abuse, when we were victims of child abuse, those all make us more vulnerable, less resilient to those traumas when they happen.
So, for those of us that don't understand what that term means, could you explain it for a moment?
Yes, ACEs is a term that came out of a hospital study in California, and it looked at the issues within families that caused medical conditions to actually be worse. So what they did is they did a study and they thought they were looking at medical issues when it turns out they were looking at psychological factors that affect children into adulthood that lower your longevity, your actual physical health, resulting in premature deaths. And out of that came 10 factors. And those factors included If your parents divorce, that is a 1 point factor. If you were a victim of physical abuse, if there was violence in your community. So they've put together, it's called the ACEs scale, and you can actually take that little scoring, self-scoring online to see what your ACEs score is. I don't know the right language for that. And you can see where your temperament or resiliency falls. And it helps you then look at your stress factors.
So we'll put that in the show notes. So we'll get the link for that. So if anybody wants to check it out, we'll put in the show notes. So thank you for explaining that. So Dr. Day, one of the things that I'd like you to spend a moment about is to give advice to the legal assistants, the paralegals, the receptionists, the people that are on the front line of customer service, case prep, and taking care of clients. As a lawyer, I knew I was going to get punched every now and then. Like I knew I was going to get a hit. And I did develop some battle scars and some resilience. However, sometimes the team that I employed, even though I tried to warn them, were not emotionally prepared for some of the things that they would have to either see or deal with in the practice. And then when it happened, or when things happened, they didn't have the coping skills and mechanisms. So let's assume somebody's listening to that, or if there's a lawyer or a team leader that's listening to this, how do they help either protect or mediate when a team member suffers a distressing situation in the practice?
So I think first of all, we can remediate things like that by doing appropriate training. So the person who's answering the phone needs to be trained on how to respond to that client who calls up in distress. So there are two types. Again, it's distress. I'm crying. My husband's leaving me, or my husband just got killed in an automobile accident, or I'm in the whatever that is. And then the other one who's angry, that angry client can be just as difficult to deal with as a distressed. So we have to give tools to our staff so they can intervene to the best of their ability without taking it on. And it goes back to those boundaries that I was talking about. I'm here to listen to you, but I'm not here if you're going to be disrespectful for me. And learning where that line is and being assertive. Assertive is different than being passive, and it's different than being aggressive in response. So we have to teach our staff to be assertive. That's stating your needs and your boundaries while asking for your need to be respected. So while I hear you, please talk to me in an appropriate tone of voice. Or it sounds like you're in a lot of distress. I'm here to help you. Can you answer a few questions for me? So recognizing that person's in distress and giving your staff permission to say, I'm going to put you on hold so I can get somebody who can help you better than I can. So again, giving them the skills and permission to know what their boundaries and limits are and to be able to reach out for a more superior staff who may have more experience to work with those things. It's validating your staff that they don't have to be abused by our clients, whether it's the distressed client or the angry client. We don't require them to stay on the phone and be berated or told negative things or yelled at. Not acceptable. So giving our staff permission to say no is so important as a coping mechanism. Because often we don't do that and we expect them to stay on that client with that client. What the staff needs to be thinking about is giving feedback to the partners or higher ups that this isn't a client that should be coming in the office and feeling comfortable to say that. I can't work with somebody who treats me like that as a client. That client is going to be disruptive to the office. What can we do differently with that client? So, from a mental health standpoint, we know that people that are coming into a law firm are in distress. They're not at their best. So, we try to give them grace, but grace only goes so far when they become abusive to us.
It's almost a spectrum. And so what you're saying is like there's a spectrum. We will give grace, we'll practice compassion, some empathy, but we have to protect ourselves in the process. And we have to train our team on jujitsu, including ourselves jujitsu.
Right.
Like how do you handle that stressed out client or you know, I don't know, opposing counsel sometimes could be a source of tremendous stress. So there's a lot of stressful interactions because it's high stress for a lot of people. Everything from, like you said, arrest, my spouse is left, emptied out my bank accounts or had a death, something terrible, terrible happened. So, any other thoughts on that to help team deal with stress in the practice?
So when your associates or your support team says, I can't manage that, don't say, yes, you can. Say, how can we help you? And it may be, I have to change my work position. And I've experienced that in my practice. We have a high stress practice, and people come in and take a job, but it's not the right fit for them. So be ready to move somebody. If they're a valuable employee, but that's not their niche, find another niche for them. But you have to be open as an employer to hear that and be willing to make those adjustments. Make sure that they're being heard. So when a difficult situation happens that they've experienced, make sure they have some safe space to come in and talk about that and to clear their head. Don't assume they can just brush it off. Not everybody is resilient. So if we think about that resiliency and the environment that they've already come from, they may have low resiliency. So recognizing we have to be able to give permission to have that safe time away from whatever that event was. Because we don't want our valued employees leaving. And that's the worst outcome is a client chases away one of our valued employees. And then there's strategies that when you do have a difficult client, what you do is you have two people in the room with that difficult client, not just one, because clients who are difficult hear things and see things differently, and you're putting somebody at risk when you have a client like that. So I always say to lawyers, have your legal assistant in the room with you when you meet with that difficult client. So there are notes being taken and there's a memory of what really happened in that meeting. Because a lot of times, what I find is people in a law firm are, again, at their worst because something bad has happened. They're distorting information. Our memory only allows us to take in so much information, and we take in pieces of it and then we consolidate it into a memory, and it's inaccurate. And it's not that they're lying or being difficult, but that's how our memories work. So, in those high stress situations, having two people present is a mitigation for risk to everyone in the practice.
Very practical advice, very practical. Let me ask you this question. Can resilience be taught and learned?
Resiliency is part of our character, and we can build on our weaknesses by developing coping skills and strategies to mitigate. So we don't have to get stuck in one place of who we are. That's called growth. We can all grow, we can become more resilient when we have the opportunity to educate ourselves, not to be criticized for all the negative. So we can grow when we get positive feedback. So, what is that? That's coping skills, that's education, and it's support from people we respect.
As I listen to you, I really appreciate that one of the things that we're not trained on in the legal profession is really one of the things that you're doing brilliantly in this particular podcast is practical coping skills, how to deal with stressful situations, how to develop resilience skills. Because it sounds like resilience in itself is something that can be, like you said, grown over a period of time, but being mindful that this is something that you need to do to protect yourself and ultimately to be a very good advocate on behalf of your clients because it's a tough business. Things can be very difficult. What other thoughts do you have that you'd like to share with our audience?
So, the last thing that I think is important is recognizing, and you said this about opposing counsel being toxic or negative or just making matters worse. And I often get asked, how do I deal with some of these negative, nasty attorneys? And I said, there's no magic way to do that. Sometimes it's saying, I won't talk to you on the phone. If you want to communicate with me, do it in writing, either by email or letter, and setting those boundaries. And it comes back to these core issues of coping. How do you apply it in each of the situations? Because there are opposing counsel who are nasty just to be nasty. You don't need that. So you've got to come up with the strategies to set those boundaries for your own self protection and your own mental health.
I remember as a young trial lawyer being opposite of an attorney, and I did ask him, "Why are you so nasty? Like, why are you so mean? Why are you so difficult all the time?" He goes, "Because there's a lot of cash in being nasty." Like, he knew that was his marketing, that was his model, he would get hired because he was a nasty guy. And a mean human being. I could not imagine that he's got a great life outside of the practice, made a lot of money, drove a nice car, but was just a nasty guy. And it was a big lesson for me because I realized, for some people it's a business model, and not to take it personal. This is what he thinks he needs to do and be to be successful as a lawyer. But it was a profound experience for me because I was like, wow, never thought of it that way before.
There are people who just want to be nasty because they are nasty. And learning the difference is important. And that's the lesson you just said.
That's perfect. That's absolutely perfect. Any final thoughts for our audience?
So I always like to tell people that it takes time. Be patient with yourself. Know that just because something happened, it doesn't mean it's the end of the world. Patience is so important as we are resilient and learn to cope. And we grow through all of those events. And remembering those really traumatic events, don't ignore them because they can actually grow into a worse scenario for you. So, those are my takeaways.
Dr. Day, thank you. Thank you for your commitment to the profession, the work. I know you're very, very rare and that you're actually an associate member of the Florida Bar. You've been on the committee for the Florida Supreme Court for selection of justices, and you've done a lot of really extraordinary work. So I just want to say thanks. Thanks for the support of the profession. Thanks for being on the podcast. And thanks for all the work you do. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. And thank you again for having me today.
Thanks for joining this week's episode of Great Practice, Great Life. Please tune in weekly to get the next episode. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, like, and don't hesitate to share it with a friend who you think this episode can help. With that, thanks, and I hope you enjoy next week's episode.